these killings that take place where normally the head is decapitated because that's the highest form of retaining honour for a family, because a girl has shown her hair, worn the wrong clothes, had a boyfriend, been too westernised, or like me, left a forced child arranged marriage. I was pretty lost, I'll be honest with you. You know, I lived for my parents because we're born in my culture that you live for your parents, you serve your parents, and we all want to belong to something. And I knew that now I'd left, I was completely a black sheep of the family, and I was going to be hunted, I was going to be looked for. I had to avoid all people from my culture because they would look for me and continue that honour killing attempt. Because I brought shame upon the family, and the way they look at it is if you leave an arranged marriage, they have to kill you to retain that honour. So I went to a women's refuge where they placed me from the hospital, and everyone there had their own demons they were dancing with. They were relying on alcohol and substance abuse, and I was too naive to understand that these people are also suffering. I didn't have that emotional intelligence that they are suffering. I couldn't help them because I couldn't help myself. And I begged the warden to give me some money so I could get to my friend. And when I arrived there, her boyfriend opened the door and I said, "Oh, where is your girlfriend? Can I please stay?" And he said, "We have 2 rooms, so you can stay, but we're no longer together." She decided to go back and have an arranged marriage. I was really grateful, but he said that I had to get a job and pay rent. So I did get a great job in the local council, and you know, I was still healing. My arm was still in a sling, and my hip was very would give me a lot of trouble. One day he said to me, "Do you want to go to a party?" Because the landlord was having a party, and I'd never been asked to go to a party or been to a party, and we didn't really communicate very well because he did his own thing, I did mine, which I kind of quite liked. I was used to that, being on my own. I remember watching people because there was a lot of people there. But he handed me a Coke, a drink, and I said thank you. I remember that night going back to the flat and the door opened and I remember falling straight down, and I remember nothing after that. But later on I realised that I was pregnant. I was being sick, my periods had stopped. And I said to him, "I think I'm pregnant." And he said, "Well, don't you remember the night we came back, you really wanted to do, sleep in my bed?" And I said, "No, I don't." And I realised that he'd raped me and taken advantage of me. But I wasn't focused on that because to me, I didn't match in that respect because I had no self-worth or self-respect. But I actually started to think about their baby and that it would give me something to focus on. And wouldn't it be nice for me to have something? And the pregnancy went through. He was never really involved in my life. He lived in the same flat. He wasn't really excited. He asked me to get rid of the baby and I said I wouldn't. And I gave birth to my first child, a beautiful girl. And she was a girl, which meant I could break that generational curse of not celebrating a girl. And I remember in hospital holding her, and I was on my own, and saying to her that I would protect her, that I would give her so much love, because my mum had told me what I shouldn't be like as a mum. She had taught me all of the things that I craved for. So I decided I would be that perfect mother for my daughter. I later on discovered that my brothers and my father came looking, and they got wind that I was living in that flat, and they got wind that I had had a child out of wedlock, which is a very big taboo in my culture. My father was wearing a blonde wig apparently, and they were going to abduct my daughter and kill her. And I stayed in and I didn't go out for months because I was too scared. And even when I did go out, I would look around and make sure my surroundings were safe, and that became a habit, and it still is that habit. My journey started to change because I was determined to make a good living for her. And I went into business and I started a mobile phone shop from my flat, and which made me a lot of money, which made me go and get a shop in the town centre, which made me known to the town centre because people would come to me. There was nobody doing that in the town at that time. I progressed on to buying another property. I progressed on to having my second child, my son. And when he was born, my relationship started to change because my partner was happy that I'd had this boy. And I thought, well, this is good because I'm not going to leave him, even though I didn't have a relationship with him and we didn't share the same bed often and we didn't go for dinner dates and sit and eat together or even talk, but that was normal to me. He asked me for money because he was going out, and I used to give him sometimes between £5,000 to £8,000 a month for his expenses. He didn't work. And he became very violent, pushing me a lot, pushing me down the stairs, pushing me in the wall, grabbing my hair and pushing it into the passenger side if he was driving. Every 11 o'clock at night, my door would be locked, and every 5 o'clock it would be opened. And I had anxiety from those sounds of a door locking. But I was too scared to leave. I had children, right? Where was I going to go? And could I make it on my own, even though I was running several businesses and I was at that time a millionaire? I felt I couldn't do it because I was always told I was too fat, too ugly, stupid, and that I was lucky to have him. So whatever capacity, whatever little bit he gave me, I would grasp and hold on to it and make excuses for his bad behaviour. And I didn't know I was in a violent situation until things were very serious. And when I was pregnant with my third child, and I was 7.5, 8 months pregnant, and he pushed me down the stairs. I fell and he left. And I remember not feeling my baby move anymore. I remember checking myself and there was a foot. And I got to the hospital and I gave birth to the most beautiful child. Most beautiful little boy, who I call Tyler. But he died shortly after birth. I remember lying there and wishing it was me that died, not him. Whilst listening to other babies crying around me because I was in this maternity ward all alone. And I asked God at that time, why have you taken him from me? And I really fell into a bout of depression whereby I did not want to live. I knew I had the 2 children. I knew I had businesses to run and people relied on me to get their wages. But Nina was tired of being that provider. Nina was tired of life. And I kind of stopped living. I didn't see my children for days. There was a little ceremony because my partner refused to accept he was even a baby, but I carried him. I felt him move. I held him when he was born. When I got home, I wanted to scream to the world, stop. But the world just carried on. But I couldn't. And I begged my partner that I wanted another baby. He was really not happy because he was having other relationships and didn't want anything to do with me and said I was so disgusting that no man would ever want me, and that I was lucky that he even looked at me because I was so disgusting. And I begged and begged and begged, and I got pregnant. This time I was sure it was a little girl because I wasn't going to have 3 boys in a row. And when I got to hospital, I said to them, can you put me in a pink room? And they said, well, what's wrong with this room? And I was, no, I want to be in a pink room. And I remember making it a really big issue. And then I had my baby, and it was a little boy. And when I held him, it was almost that I had Tyler back. But I knew it wasn't. In a way, he gave me that reason to live again. In that moment, in that time, I did my best. And my daughter went off to university. And she started to come back and question things and say, I don't like the way you treat my mum. And her dad would say, right, you're not coming back anymore. And our communication was severed. We couldn't communicate. He would go to see her and I couldn't. And I really missed that. And I used to think the children didn't know what was going on because I was in a separate room. But domestic violence isn't just happening to the person, it's happening to the whole family. And it destroyed the boys. It destroyed them in a way that they couldn't do anything, but they heard every threat. They felt every punch. They almost went through it when I did. And my son stood up to his father for the first time, and I actually stood up to him too because he punched my son for no reason. He came down the stairs and hit him in the back of his head. And even then, I did not leave. I just was so scared of leaving. But my son was very, very brave. He had had enough. I think people get to a point where they can't take it any longer. And he went to school and told them everything. It was literally like opening a can of worms, and I suppose he couldn't stop talking once he started. And I was removed by social services. I had no choice but to leave. I had literally 20 minutes to leave. There was a little window that we could go. We ended up in an emergency housing place where the council put us, and I remember finding a little bit of a tissue in my bottom of my pocket, and I tried to clean one of the beds that was cleaner than the other and wrapped him up in my coat and lay him down because he was mentally and physically exhausted and he was sick. I went into the other room, and I think for the first time in my life I allowed Nina to cry. I wasn't crying in a way I'd ever cried before because we're told it's weak to cry, that you can't cry, that you've got to carry on with life. But I allowed myself to be weak, and I think it's in that those weak times that I found my actual strength. And I remember standing up and there was no music and I started to dance. We had no curtains, and I remember not caring about anybody looking in. And I was actually moving so much that I felt a release. And I knew that I had to keep going for him. He had nobody but me. He relied on me. I had a injunction so that nobody could contact me, but they don't really carry much weight, I'll be honest with you. They're a waste of paper and lawyers' time because it just means nobody can hit you, but they can come to your face and threaten you. And my ex-partner was doing that. So I moved over 200 miles to where I am now. And that's when things really changed. The police came to find me and they said to me that we need to speak to you about your sister. And I said, I don't have a sister. I discovered that my father had had an extramarital affair with a Polish lady and that he was trying to hide his affair, and he had had many affairs. But this one was slightly different because the lady had had a baby girl. And when the baby girl was 6 years old, her name is Julia, my father abducted her and took her to several places. I think he travelled into Europe to several destinations before he took her to India, where he sold her to traffickers. And the police said that they went over to the place he left her, but they couldn't get access to where she was. And it wasn't until maybe a year later of me knowing all of this it really hit me. Maybe because I wasn't able to look at the information or understand the information, but I suddenly thought, I have a sister who was taken by force and I'm doing nothing about it. And I don't know if she's alive, because the place that she was taken is a place where they harvest organs, and I didn't know whether she had been killed, but I suddenly started seeing my own daughter at 6. And I knew that she would have been so scared. I realised that she's not my only sister, that all of those girls and women and men and boys that were taken because they've done something against the culture, maybe their sexual preference isn't how the culture believes it should be. I started to look into these things. I knew about the babies that were placed into bags and suffocated, and I knew that in Marie Claire there was an article that there was a baby decapitated on the side of the road in China, and people are just walking past this baby. And I said, I've got to do something. But I was scared because I knew what would happen and my safe space would be at risk. But I believed my journey, as painful as it has been for something. I don't have a degree. I wasn't allowed to get educated, but this was my education and I want change. So I started speaking out. I would either speak on the radio or I would speak on TV. Whatever I would get, I would try to raise awareness. And nobody wanted to speak to me about this word honour killings. But I would write 15 to 20 messages each day to people. I would send emails. I would contact them on Instagram. But nobody wanted to let me speak. And I felt like a child again where I was muted. And slowly people started to understand what honour killings are and that they are something that my culture do and cultures like it in Africa, in South America, in the Middle East, most of Asia. Sometimes they're called something else, but they are these killings that take place where normally the head is decapitated because that's the highest form of retaining honour for a family, because a girl has shown her hair, worn the wrong clothes, had a boyfriend, been too westernised, or like me, left a forced child arranged marriage. I speak in Parliament and I ask them to pass a law and change the narrative, because if I had turned up that day at the age of 21 looking the way I did and said, this is an attempted murder, they would have done something about it. But because an honour killing is protected because it's a cultural crime, the sentence is less than a murder.
Currently in the UK, what is the situation with honour killings and what do you want people in this country to know about them?
It's really hard to ask for help. You feel guilty, you feel like you have to protect your parents, and if you want to do something for you, you feel like you don't deserve it, but you do. And what I say to people is contact me, my non-profit, contact any non-profit, but don't think that you can't get away, that you can't escape. And I say to people, if you're being forced to go to another country, place something metallic in your pockets or maybe even in your underwear where it sets off the alarm bells when you go through security, and ask for help, because you deserve that help. When I tell my story, it's never been for me. Admittedly, it started for my sister, and then it went on to all of the girls and men that needed my help. And it's not easy, and I get upset because it's like cutting myself open so that other people can heal. But this story is never about me. It's for those people that resonate with it because they've struggled, whether it's mental health, whether it's something that's nothing to do with my culture, because my non-profit is open to everyone. I don't want them to feel that they can't contact me. Some of the messages I get is, I've not found anyone to help me. I'm not from your culture, but can you help me? Predominantly, I speak about honour killings and human trafficking because it's happened to me directly with my sister and myself, and child marriages and child abuse. But what I do this for is so that other people know they're not alone, because often I felt I was alone because I was that bad spirit that didn't matter. So I would like anyone who's out there listening to this to know that there's somebody out there for them, and that somebody is me, but also that there are a whole load of good, supportive people that will help you, but you have to ask for that help. I am working really hard. I am on a board at Scotland Yard. I go to Parliament, and I've spoken recently to West Midlands Police in a conference, and I'm due to go to Cambridge Police too. And my message is always the same. I ask them, are you listening? Because I don't think people are listening that can make a change, the people that can serve and protect us. And the message is, let's abolish this word, honour killing. Let's replace it with what it is. And what it is an attempted murder or a murder. A couple of days ago, and I've not said this, one of the victims I've been trying to help escape from Pakistani heritage on the outskirts of London was killed in a hit and run, whilst her two young girls and a suitcase sat at a bus stop because she was trying to escape. I'd been speaking to her for months, trying to support her. My non-profit was offering her a taxi, a train ride. I would put her up somewhere. I would help her. And somehow she must have had an opportunity to get away. And the police rang me because her last call was to me. And I tried to explain to them they need to do something, but they said there is no proof. And this is where we, as a society, fail the victims. This is where the police, who are supposed to protect and service, fail because the laws are not passed to protect people. And those 2 girls that she has will not be protected.
How has your relationship with your identity changed over the years?
I used to wish I was the boy sat next to me or 2 spaces beside me at school, because he was this white British boy that everyone loved and liked. I used to wish I was one of the men in the office because they were more respected. I used to wish I was my brothers. But when I hit a certain age, I realised I would be nothing if I was one of those people. The only person I was ever meant to be was me. I celebrate myself as a woman. I celebrate my life because I love everything that's happened to me, which sounds odd to people, but I wouldn't be Nina without that trauma, without those tears, without that fear. I wouldn't have the ability to help others. So I love everything that nobody ever loved about me more, and I will continue to do so. All my life I'd been threatened that we will bury you under these floorboards, and I really believed they would. And within no time, they'd broken my jaw. They had broken my arm, and I was in a lot of pain.